Hey, it's Clayton Olson, and in this video, I'm going to talk about what to do and why your woman, your wife, your girlfriend might not trust you. In fact, I'm going to open up a subtle reason why she might not trust you that has nothing to do with cheating. It has nothing to do with you overtly lying to her. And in fact, it's one of these reasons that is it often goes unseen. And I'm going to attempt to articulate and put language to a dynamic that may be showing up in your relationships that you are just too close to actually see clearly. Now, this video is intended for men, as the example that I use in this video is actually from a male client that I was working with in the past. However, this can happen in a relationship from the woman's side as well, where she is feeling like she's not being trusted for whatever reason, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So the example that I've got here is one from a recent client that I've been working with. I helped him get through a breakup and then actually get into another relationship with a woman that he was very attracted to. And what we began to see happen in our calls, a recurring complaint that was coming up, was that he wasn't feeling completely trusted by the woman that he was with. She was questioning whether or not he really wanted to be with her. She was saying things like, we don't really need to do this if you don't want. We can get off the phone now if you want. You don't actually have to hang out with me if you want. And it was really frustrating for him. And he was feeling like his love wasn't enough, like his devotion and perhaps his demonstration of connection wasn't being seen. And in these cases, when we start to feel insecure, it can be really easy to throw a judgment out against the other person and say, well, they're just really insecure and they are needing reassurance that I can't give them. And perhaps they've got some baggage that they're working on in the past and it has nothing to do with me, and therefore I don't have to look at myself. And that's exactly what that type of thinking does. It exonerates us from having to take responsibility for anything that we might be throwing into the pot that is actually, in fact, creating this dynamic. So if you feel like you can relate to this situation and you've been in a relationship where you haven't been feeling trust and there's nothing overt that you've done and there was no lapse of integrity, here's what actually might be going on. It might be that you are feeling obligated to hang out or obligated to caretake your partner's emotional experience. So here's what I mean, if we're just to put this into like brass tacks, a brass tacks demonstration. If you're talking with your partner and you're wanting to get off the phone, but you're not because you're afraid of the impact it might have on them by you honoring yourself, so instead you compromise your values, you compromise your boundaries, and you go along with something that you don't want to do, with the intent of trying to protect them from having an emotional reaction, a negative emotional reaction to you going and doing what you want to do, what often ends up happening is your partner can actually sense the fact that you are feeling obligated to them, and they may say something like, we don't actually have to do this if you don't want to. We don't actually have to do that if you don't want to. And so what they're actually responding to is beyond your words, beyond your actions. They're responding to your intentions, and they're feeling the fact that you are leaving some part of yourself behind. You're compromising your values, your boundaries in some way to please them. And so they start to try to look out for you. And in that moment, they actually stop trusting you. They stop trusting you to be able to hold the line for yourself. They stop trusting you to be able to hold the line for your own boundaries and anchor yourself. So suddenly they start questioning whether or not what you're doing is really what you want to be doing. And then they start to become insecure because they're thinking, okay, well, is this person just hanging out with me out of obligation? Are they hanging out with me because they are afraid of how I might act? And what it is that if this is what you are doing, if you are caretaking their emotional experience and separating from your own and no longer honoring yourself and trying to be whatever you can to make sure that they're satisfied and harmonious, what you end up doing is you are appealing to their fragility. You are appealing and seeing them as somebody that is fragile, and perhaps you're also seeing yourself as being fragile. That they can't handle their own emotional experience of whatever impact it's going to cause on them by you saying, hey, it's time for me to get off the phone, or no, I'm not going to be hanging out with you this weekend, or no, I'm going to go home now. And you compromise yourself in order to appeal to them and to try to keep the emotional experience as positive as possible, which ultimately leads to an inauthentic relationship. And in that inauthenticity, that is where this distrust is born. So, what is the solution? Well, the solution is to actually begin to get right with the core fear that is underneath this idea of what you think might happen if you drew a boundary, right? So what is it that you think might happen if you were to honor yourself fully in a relationship and say, yeah, I don't feel like doing that, or I need to get off the phone now, or I want to go do this. What are you afraid that might happen? Well, more than likely you're afraid that by you showing up authentically and honoring yourself, that somehow that's going to cause a rupture in the relationship and they're going to leave you. So there is this fear of abandonment that is typically there, that is underneath this kind of nice guy, nice girl mentality where we're compromising ourselves to try to please the other person. Now, my advice or recommendation is to actually, rather than running from that, to step into it and actually practice drawing boundaries. Practice drawing boundaries from a place where you realize that by not drawing the boundaries, you are actually creating the exact situation that you don't want to be in, right? Which is the abandonment. Because see, if you're not drawing boundaries and you are continually separating from yourself in the relationship, if you are not looking out for your needs, if you're not looking out for your own boundaries, you end up evaporating in the relationship, you disconnect from yourself, and eventually your partner will follow suit. They will disconnect from you because you are not connected to yourself. Another way of putting it is if you can't have a strong no in your relationship, and a strong no is perhaps having boundaries around the things that you want and don't want to do, then you actually can't have a strong yes either. So how can they trust you when you say yes to something if the way that they are seeing you is somebody that has been compromising themselves and feeling obligated to them? So the stronger that you can get with your no in relationship, the more that you can honor yourself and trust that by you honoring yourself, even if there is a little bit of a rupture on the other side, even if there is some impact that needs to be communicated and talked about, that is actually in service of the health of the relationship. It's in service of them trusting you. It's in service of them realizing that you are taking care of yourself and that they can take care of themselves. It gives both people permission to be in the relationship, taking care of themselves, and therefore then being able to help each other as well and grow the relationship. A healthy relationship is one in which you do not abandon yourself to be with the other person. It's where you can stay connected over here and then connect over there as well. But the minute you lose this connection over here, that's where the distrust happens. So begin to pay attention to where you may be doing this indirectly in your relationships and begin to honor yourself more clearly with the communication that I teach in some of these videos and with trusting that by you honoring yourself, you overall are putting an investment into the health of the relationship in general.